Okay, I think it's 9 p.m. We can start now. So, salam and greetings to everyone from Dhaka, Bangladesh. My name is Mohammad Mainul Islam. I'm a professor in the Department of Population Sciences at the University of Dhaka and moderator of today's event, Let's Talk Population and Development. I welcome you all to the sixth episode of this initiative. Let's Talk Population and Development is an online series of conversations with academicians, researchers, policymakers, and practitioners working in population and development. Since July 11, 2024, World Population Day, I have taken this online initiative with the support and interest of my current and former students, colleagues, and friends in academia and beyond, as well as those interested in population and development. This 50-minute interactive online dialogue is open to all stakeholders, and this is a platform to discuss the practice of population and development and analytical work centered on policy to improve the quality of people's lives. Last year, we celebrated 30 years of International Conference on Population and Development. Remarkable gains have been made in sexual and reproductive health and rights, that is named as SRHR. But despite the progress, hundreds of millions of women today still face economic, social, institutional, and other barriers that prevent them from making their own decisions about whether, when, and how often and with whom to become pregnant. So, dear participants, that we are now in the era of sustainable development, where 17 SDG goals, 169 targets to achieve by 2030. We are only 5 years ahead of this agenda milestone. We have achievements, progress, and challenges to achieve further in this regard. And taking a particular goal like SDG 3 and 5 as an example, at the current rate of progress, it will take a long time to achieve. Reproductive rights and family planning are mentioned in both SDG 3 and SDG 5, but neither goal explicitly aims to reduce population growth. And it is argued that there is a big risk that the world will achieve little of the 2030 agenda, especially in countries where high birth rates persist. Changes in population policies and norms can reduce birth rates further. I understand that the sustainable development goals for developing countries cannot be achieved without the leadership of social, economic, and political realms. In this regard, today's topic is the family planning programs and SRHR, different paradigms, different success. And during today's 50 minutes talk, we will have a very distinguished personnel, Professor Emeritus Frank Gottmark, Department of Biological and Environmental Sciences, University of Gothenburg, Sweden, and head of the Overpopulation Project. Professor Frank has extensive skills and expertise on conservation biology, sustainable human population, human ecology, biodiversity, and conservation. He is currently mainly working on aspects on human fertility and population growth, including consequences for people, environment, and ecosystems. In addition, Professor Frank conducts research on population policies and their roles for sustainable development. And I have seen that his recent publications on population appeared in Journal of Population and Sustainability, Biological Conservation, African Journal of Reproductive Health, Sustainable Development, International Environment Agreement, etc. I'm very much grateful to Professor Frank Gottmark for his kind consent and presence during today's talk. Now it is the time to hear from my distinguished guest, Professor Emeritus Frank Gottmark. During or after his speech or presentation, you can ask questions and comments. Considering the episode's allocation of the time, you know that 50 minutes, I would take questions mainly from the chat room first. If you want to ask a question, please write your surname and your question in the chat room. You can also use the raise hand function to ask questions. But Professor Frank and I discussed earlier in the talk that we would appreciate if you ask your questions in the chat room for better understanding and clarity. Now I am requesting Professor Frank Gottmark for his talk on today's topic. Professor Frank, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mainul. I'm grateful for this invitation. It's a pleasure to be able to talk to people interested in population in other countries. So I usually talk to my students here in Sweden, sometimes also abroad by Zoom, but not that often. So I'm really happy to reach out here, and I'm curious what you think also. So I have to start by trying to get my PowerPoint up here and to share. Let's see if it works. And I think I have to take it by.
Yes.
You can see it now?
Yes,
okay.
We can.
Yeah, thank you. So you see, I've changed the title a little bit, but I will be talking about family planning and sexual and reproductive health and rights. But I wanted to give a background for the research I've been involved in, and this is about the last 8 or 9 years that I've done this research, and just to give you a background. Some of you might be aware of this, but it's good to have a broad perspective. First, so let's look at the first slide here. Let's see. Okay, so you may have seen this graph before, human population growth with world population in billions on the y-axis, and then thousands of years on the x-axis. And somewhere, some of you might remember this famous book, The Population Bomb, which was written by Paul Ehrlich and his wife Anne in 1968. It was published. I was born earlier in 1955, and the population then was about a bit less than 3 billion. So you can see there, I'm 70. So from 1955 today, we have this increase by more than 5 billion people in a very short while. So the book Population Bomb, they republished another book in 1990s, which called The Population Explosion. So it referred to the bomb, and I think it's pretty correct. You can talk about really an explosion in such a short period of time. No other species on Earth have managed to do something similar. So this is the website we use for our research and outreach. So my main colleagues, there's one, Phil Kafari in the United States, Colorado State University, and also Jane O'Sullivan in Queensland, another researcher there. So we have weekly blogs, publications, and other resources to check here. And well, the name of this site attracts attention. People wonder, what is this? Well, and I think the word overpopulation needs some explanation here, because at least in Western countries, you don't often hear this term. Actually, hear it more often in Africa. Is when I follow the media from Africa. But we should define that. So I have 3 definitions of overpopulation, and actually you can discuss this with colleagues and students too, because there is no generally accepted definition. But I think the first one you see here is perhaps the most common. I took it from Wikipedia. So overpopulation exists when human populations become too large to be sustained by their environment or resources in the long term. I often call this the carrying capacity definition, because in in ecology, carrying capacity refers to the ceilings so above the population cannot increase. One limitation of this definition, I think that people are very clever in getting more resources from the earth. So if you get more resources, you get more people. So I don't think this catches the full meaning of overpopulation. So we look at the second definition then. That is, human societies or the world as a whole are overpopulated when their populations are too large to preserve the ecosystem services necessary for future people's well-being and to share the landscape fairly with other species. This comes from my colleague Phil Kafari in the US. He's used this in a paper. So you see that is broader. Here we talk about people's well-being and we talk about other species in ecosystems. So I think that's a bit better, but I will favor a third definition here, shorter. So overpopulation is when too many people are consuming too much and seriously damage ecosystem for us and for many non-human life forms. So the good thing with this definition is that you have the word consuming and consumption. Every human consumes stuff. So that should always be a part of human consumption, should be a part of overpopulation, not just number of people. So that is what I suggest. This is good to discuss, I think. Okay. We managed recently to get a paper with the title Overpopulation. You cannot find many scientific papers actually on overpopulation, but so the title is Overpopulation is a major cause of biodiversity loss, and smaller human populations are necessary to preserve what is left. The publication of this paper led to responses and a debate in the journal. You can easily find that debate if you follow. But it's getting cited and people are interested in this paper, which makes me happy. So what have people done on this earth? Looking at biodiversity, we can measure the mammals in terms of biomass. So each square is 1 million ton here. This is the work of a Canadian scientist, Smil, 20 years ago. So this is the all terrestrial mammals and their biomass. So you can see people in the center and all the domestic animals and you got horses and dogs, etc. here, and especially cattle. So what's remaining of the wild mammals on Earth is the small green stars. This would have looked totally different if you go back many thousand years ago. And one conclusion here is that you can see here the biomass of Homo sapiens and domestic animals is 50 times larger than that of all wild terrestrial animals together. But overpopulation is just not about biodiversity. I'm sure you are aware of many other negative effects of growing population and consumption. Note again, population and consumption combined. So for instance, one of the major problems concern freshwater. I'm sure you are aware of that in Bangladesh. Actually, one of my colleagues at my university is working with salt tolerance in plants in Bangladesh, telling me about that. We don't want to have that situation in many countries for sure, but the problem exists. The main problem is irrigation for cereals, etc. Of pollution levels, in many ways, toxic animals, plastic, you can have a long list about that. Then you get crowding in urban areas with less green spaces. Even here in our country, with only 10 million people, you have this building green spaces disappeared in the urban areas. Disease incidence is an interesting thing because during COVID, the pandemic, almost none talked about population. But if you have population growth and urban growth, you get people packed together. That increases the disease risk, especially that people fly between different countries also. So that's a major factor for pandemic, risk of pandemic. And of course, climate, which is in the media all the times, and many other aspects also. So this is, of course, serious. So, well, people say, well, the population growth rate is declining. Well, that is true, but what is interesting is the number of people, the absolute numbers, and what is happening there. United Nations is carefully checking every other year with their population projections. I guess most of you have seen this, but it's worth looking at it again. So this is from the 2022. There is one from 2024, but it's very similar. So what we have, the global average is 2.3 children per woman, the total fertility rate. What is interesting with that projection, that more than 2 billion people up to year 2100, is that the UN demographers assume that we will converge towards 2.1 children per woman, the replacement rate. So if, for instance, we would continue to have 2.3, we probably end up 12 or 13 billion or something. You can easily check that with the projections, actually. But I think it's especially important to point out to people the enormous effect of minus 0.5 child per woman or plus 0.5 child per woman. So the reduction here doesn't sound much with 0.5. So every other woman or every other family have one child less. That could mean that we have a smaller population year 2100 compared to today. You can see that on the graph. I think that's a very optimistic thing to mention, I think, for people everywhere. Okay, let's go on. You should also, of course, where population growth is happening. And most of you have perhaps seen this, which is very illustrative. So we can put in year 2025 here, and you see what the future would look like if the United Nations demographers are correct. Well, we have some continued population growth in Asia, but the big change is in Africa. And that is even if fertility rate declines there to converge to 2.1 child per woman, as I showed you last graph. So you see Oceania, that's just a small strike up there, difficult to see, but otherwise you have South America, North America, and Europe. So, okay. So this is important to keep in mind because the world population needs to consume, and that with free trade, facts, ecosystems all over the world. And here you the fertility rate currently you have I put that in close to Africa, that 4.2 children per woman. It's higher in sub-Saharan Africa than in Northern Africa. Okay, then we come to the means to reduce the fertility rate. Family planning and SRHR, sexual and reproductive health and rights. So I start by defining family planning because the word is in many texts, including the SDGs. But I would argue that it's different to talk about family planning than to talk about family planning program. So I would say the definition, this is from the textbook, the definition of family planning is just plan a family, attempts to by couples to regulate the number and spacing of birth. While I think we should define family planning program as something like so the program that would be a systematic effort involving both government, political leaders, and a local level, villages and whatever, to provide information, supplies, and services for modern voluntary birth control. We don't want to have any coercion here, so voluntary is, of course, important. Now, looking at this historically, history is important, very important population policy. So family planning programs started already in mid-60s, 1960s. And in Bucharest, the UN conference in 1974, we saw much support for these family planning programs. Well, I think that was still there in 1984, but in 1984 we had this resistance from the United States, the so-called global gag rule, where they didn't allow any support to abortion in any organization that they supported. Well, then we had the latest Cairo in 1994. Actually, these conferences were supposed to continue, but they ended. There were no one in 2004. Well, there was a big change in Cairo. So instead of family planning programs, much of the text is about sexual and reproductive health and rights. A fine concept by itself, but you got the lack of this term family planning, which more I'll say refers to family size and the earlier programs that. So what that led to a dramatic decline in support for family planning programs after from about mid-1990s, even though population growth continued by about 80 million per year, like one new Germany each year. So I'll go back to look at what happened earlier. The successful family planning programs that were voluntary. So some of you might have seen this example from Indonesia. You have on the y-axis total fertility rate, and then you have the start of the program in the late 60s, and the program lasted over this light blue period here to the end of 90s, and the TFR leveled out a little bit. And this looks in several countries. One strikingly successful program is the one in Iran. Iran actually had a program very early, but that was not very successful. And then there was a war with Iraq. And in 1988, after the war, the country was very poor and in bad conditions. But the religious leaders actually allowed a voluntary family planning program to start in 1988. And this is probably the historically most successful program, also voluntary actually. So you see it, TFR comes below 2 children per woman there. Unfortunately, they have a reversed policy, but the women's don't still have low TFR in the country, fortunately. So and this can be shown for several countries, and it's just coinciding with this period, 1965 to 1995. So here you have Indonesia. So the blue is TFR in the mid-60s, 1965. The orange is TFR in 1995, just when the Cairo conference came. And so you have Indonesia, Thailand, Bangladesh, Brazil, Costa Rica, both Latin America and Asia. But you have an exception then, the countries in sub-Saharan Africa pooled together here. You see very little effect on the period 1965 to 1995. And then there were some family planning programs, but they were generally weak. So for me, this is good evidence that family planning programs were effective. But fertility is influenced by many factors. That is for sure. It's not easy. It's not easy to tear apart all the reasons for declining fertility. Actually, the best evidence that family planning programs works comes from Bangladesh. You should be proud about that. And you are aware of this MATLAB family planning experiment, which also I have read about, of course. But if I go out to Swedish citizens or any European citizens and ask why are birth rate declining in the world, they would say, I've tested this with polls and get see the answer, what people answer. They say, well, if only these countries would develop like in Africa, you would have fewer smaller families. That is what most people say. Most people know very little about fertility and population aspects. So anyway, this I have written a very nice paper showing that there is no relation between declining birth rate and GDP or consumption levels in developing countries. There is just no relationship. But there is, you could expect that, a very strong relationship between contraceptive prevalence, which are related to family planning. Anyway, what are the main demographers saying about fertility and why fertility rate is declining in developing countries? Well, there are two schools of thought. One, especially proponent of this first one, increasing education is the reason why people have women have less kids. Just more school years, they've had a strong correlation between number of school years and family size. That correlation can easily be shown. And the second is demographers emphasizing family planning programs, just as I showed. You might think that, well, these can be combined, and it's probably true. But what in education is it that make people having smaller families? Of course, if you stay into colleges and universities, you don't have much time to build a family and so on. But it's very few studies looking at the quality of education. Almost no, I've never seen a study about what's in the education per se. I mean, you could talk about family planning, you can talk about many things in education. So after Cairo, you get this strong paradigm. The UN and UNFPA rely on sexual and reproductive health and rights. So the word family planning program disappeared, became controversial, partly because of policy in China, so on. But as far as we can see, there's very little evidence that SRHR has such a good effect on fertility rate, declining fertility rate. It is a good thing. It's a desirable, but and there comes some good evidence here from Africa. I want to show you this. That this is the demographer John Bongartz has done very good work, and this shows some effect you have on the y-axis, percent of women or couples using modern contraception, and on the x-axis, mean year of schooling for women aged 20 to 39. So you see some positive correlation between education and contraceptive use. But if you look at the strength of the family planning programs, which differ among the countries here, you can see that that raises contraceptive use much more than apparently education does. So the size of the bubbles is the strength of the program strength, and the line separating is the 5-year average. So they made it into 3 groups here. So that's good evidence. If you get better family planning programs from Africa, we can tackle the high fertility rate there, I think. So the conclusions that I want to emphasize is that family planning programs are important in countries with fertility rates above 2.1 children per woman. Secondly, increased education can also help, especially if it includes education about environmental matters, sexual education, and family planning information. And third, sexual and reproductive health and rights is a good thing, but without family planning, it seems insufficient in reducing birth rate in high fertility countries. So these are my 3 conclusions. And so then we can see what comes up. Questions from you, the audience. Stop this. Okay. Here I can see questions now.
Yes.
So the first question is,
yeah.
Can I take the first question, Mainul?
Yes, Frank, please go ahead the questions, yeah. Because these
Okay.
questions actually come out while the registration for this talk, my talk was done. Yeah, so please, you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the first is overpopulation a burden for development in the context of Bangladesh? Well, I think most of you are in a better position to answer this than I am, but I have seen the population density in actually it's very high in Bangladesh, and it is also in South Korea, and it is also in Central Europe, actually. I mean, take Holland, but so perhaps someone else will want to answer this question.
So, Frank, there is also another questions, Can you see?
Yeah. So we can move on to the next. What are your suggestions on moving family planning programs beyond women-specific approaches and cultivating greater male involvement in family planning methods, particularly in developing countries like Bangladesh? I think that is a very good question. I didn't have time to go into partner support for family planning and involvement of males, and also religious leaders are very important. So Daryl's done some good work on that. I'm actually reading about it for the moment. So, but I think much can be done here. Sometimes only a focus on women, but really education of men and reaching out to men. And that may be most efficiently done, at least in Africa, by the religious leaders, because people listen to them. So here is a question from a master student in population sciences. What indicators do you consider most effective in evaluating the success of a family planning program? Are current metrics like contraceptive prevalence sufficient to measure holistic success? That is the first question. Well, that is also a good question. There is a there have been measures of family planning programs for long, but the problem is that I can't remember what's the name of that site. You can probably easily find it. The problem with doing an analysis of these measures is that you only have them for certain countries. It's a biased subset of countries. So you can, I mean, you have for almost all countries on Earth good education measures, but you don't have that. You can compare non-family planning programs countries with family planning programs countries. But John Bongartz that you saw, he developed a new measure for Africa, as I showed you in the graph there. So take a look at that paper. So another question in a country like Bangladesh.
So once the question will come up, you will see we can respond that one. But let me interact with you for a while. So Frank, I know that you have a very good expertise and you have a very good knowledge regarding these overpopulation issues, even SRHR issues for developing countries. So, I was reading one of your co-authored commentary that published in Project Syndicate, and where you are arguing that the world and the United Nations must reduce the population growth. So regarding that, you are also mentioning there that by adding a further SDG, that means aimed at slowing the increase in population, the world could yet save UN's 2013 agenda. So why do you think so? Would you give a little bit clarifications, and during your explanation, few questions may come out. Yeah.
I certainly think that it would be great to have a single goal just about population, but so the leadership of the United Nations, they shy away from this. They think it's sensitive in some way to talk about populations, and probably there was the resistance from some countries when they discussed the SDGs. So that is really a pity, and but it's actually different in climate change discussions. We have the IPCC. They actually state in the basic documents that the reason for these increasing emissions are due to population growth and economic growth. They're two major factors. But then if you look at the summary document for policymakers, they skipped saying that, which is kind of stupid because people must see reality. And again, showing that it's sensitive for some reason to talk about population. So, but I think it's changing. The much good new research coming out. Well, look at
so
other
you
questions.
got another questions. His name is Abdullah Al Mamun. So
yeah,
he was mentioning that in the last 15 to 18 years in Bangladesh, women literacy increased around 15%. Enrollment in tertiary education also increased by this time. Contraceptive prevalence rate also increased, but TFR is stagnant at 2.3. Bangladesh has also faced such stagnation earlier. What is your thought on this? That means that he was asking about your stagnant TFR in Bangladesh since 2011 to 2022 or 24 at this moment. Yeah.
Well, could it be a decline in the strength of family planning programs, or its role in education? I mean, the answer is would be wonderful to have for this stagnant TFR, and some of you probably know better than I am. So, so
No,
what is the politicians are probably involved in some way. I don't know, but I hope it will be changed.
you have also got another one question,
Yeah.
is that that currently, that we have an interim government is in Bangladesh now. So reform commissions already formed. So reform commission in Bangladesh recently proposed to initiate 4 times maternity leave for women workers. Some stakeholders, especially factory owners, argue that it will adversely impact population programs in Bangladesh. So don't you think such a conclusion dehumanizes women's worker? I mean, the conclusion is based on a view that women can't make decisions properly. So this is his viewpoint, and asking your comments or opinion regarding this.
This
So,
maternity leave, it says 4 times what? Is it month or
no,
what?
no, it's like the maternity leave. Once they are having in a job, so once they're getting pregnant in their reproductive history, maybe 4 times maximum time a person can avail. Yeah,
Oh, okay. I
yeah,
see.
yeah.
Mhm.
And before that, also I have another questions to you. If you like to respond that one, you can do it. But
Mhm.
Frank, what I was thinking before coming to this talk today, that uh, and also we are writing the family planning program, population growth issues, what's happening in the world at this moment. But I would like to know something more clear answer from you, that how do you evaluate the progress so far, that means with special reference to developing countries. You already mentioned in the figure some of the countries they have done very good success. So I'm thinking about since ICPD 1994 in Cairo, that means the family planning since 1994, how far have we progressed? I'm not talking about the long-term interval, but since 1994 to till now, how far have we progressed? Do you think so? And regarding, do you think any possibility of changing policies for family planning in coming times?
I think the answer to that really has to be country specific, because now we see, you all know about the problems with the American aid, which have disappeared, and so that means there's greater. You have to have confront national leaders much more on these issues. I remember my colleague Carl Warren. He talked about the part of the government, the health departments, they have the lowest funding among all of them, because there's so much focus on economic growth. So I think we really have to challenge the leaders much more. And is that it's very hard to say, because of you make these broad analysis, and then you have to have more specific knowledge from individual countries. That's very desirable to look at the ones like Ethiopia, Rwanda, in Africa. Where is their success, and how did they go along to get that success? I mean, so that could be one thing to do.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So regarding, as just just few seconds before, you mentioned about Rwanda, Ethiopia, but I think another one country, Malawi, can also be an example. And
Yeah.
yeah, and you rightly mentioned, I think that, I think that at this moment, maintaining political will from the leadership aspects, and also global funding for family planning might be a critical challenge regarding SRHR and
Yeah.
family planning, what we are facing now.
Yeah, for sure. Uh, It's very hard to see the future now, but I think I appreciate that so many researchers are emphasizing the role of population growth and for instance, this big group of what's it called now? I don't remember the name, but there is
So yeah, yeah. Yeah. So
but
yeah, Frank, there are another two comments come out. I think, if you think so, you would like to address, or it's fine, just have a look through that. One comments come out, how global fund cut by US will hamper overall SRHR and family planning over the developing countries. So this is the one. And
yeah.
do you like to address that one? And also another one you have. Then I think MD Mahibul Hassan Jisan and earlier on Muhammad Ibrahim Khalil. And Jisan was saying that, can we imagine the TFR dropping to 1.0 someday? If it does, what might the worst consequences? So you may respond to both of them, or anything you want.
Yeah. So these are very difficult questions. So of course you can argue that in 4 years there will be a new U.S. government and a new election, but that the Trump administration can destroy quite a bit before that, and so so perhaps there are some questions that we haven't discussed here, but
So that one was just saying they're dropping to TFR 1.0. That means less than TFR 1.0. What might be the consequences?
Well, one thing I can mention is that you had talk about South Korea. That was one of the most successful family planning programs. It started all in 1962 or something like that. But so it took more than 60 years for the population to start to decline. You see, it takes such a long time. That needs to be emphasized, like in Africa. Partly because, of course, longevity increased. There were medical advances and so on. But it really takes time to get population decline. And that's also a very dense population in South Korea. But we haven't had time to talk much about low fertility, because there is this scream among the Western world, well, the population is, but actually that's a wholly different topic. I would suggest, Mainul, that some researchers in Greece are doing very good work. They looked at Eastern Europe and Southern Europe, where you have had population decline. Actually, what happened was that economic growth increased per capita. And unemployment decreased too. So there was positive effects of declining number of people. I mean, also it's a generally a good thing. People live longer. That's a success. And in the future, you have fewer people on Earth, improvement in environment, biodiversity, etc. So that stupid scream about, oh, the population is declining, is even demographers is resisting this. There's a good book. See where I have that here. I can show you this one. It's a recommended reading. You see the title?
Sure.
Decline and Prosper. You have to show that to the politicians. Vegard Skibek is a very clever demographer in Norway.
Yes, we can see it. Yeah.
That's a wonderful book. Although he emphasized education more than family planning. Well, I disagree about that, though. But of course, both education and family planning programs are good. So,
So yeah. So we got another one comments from Anisur Rahman. He was mentioning that thank you, sir, for arranging this webinar. My question is how can family planning programs be better integrated with comprehensive SRHR initiative to address the needs of marginalized communities who are often left out of mainstream policy frameworks in Bangladesh? He is the Anisur Rahman, head of the planning and development section, Dhaka University Library. And also
Okay,
another one,
that's a
yeah,
good question. That's a good question,
yeah,
I think. Yeah. So
yeah.
I don't know much about Bangladesh, but I can refer back to the program in Iran. So what happened there that they have 15,000 mobile clinics that reach all the small villages throughout the countries. Each couple that was supposed to be married, they had counseling and they had free contraceptives and so on. So the whole society was involved in this. So things like that matters, of course. You have to reach all people far away, also not only in the cities, etc.
You can see other two comments there also. Sadia Afrin from Department of Population Sciences. She was thinking, thank you for your presentation. I would like to ask, are two mentioned school of thoughts enough to decline fertility in developing countries? And another question come out from the UNFPA personnel, Mr. Khandukar Zakir Rahman. How can policy frameworks be reoriented to better align family planning programs with comprehensive SRHR goals, ensuring equitable access and sustainable outcomes?
Well, I think we have to learn from history a little bit here because the history is sort of hidden, partly because of the mistakes in China and also in India, 1975, etc. But there are so many good examples. So we have gathered on our website. You can go to family planning success stories, and you see examples from 8 countries where we explain what happened and so on. And yeah, so okay.
So I think no more question now. It's 9:52 in Bangladesh. So already we had 50 minutes.
Yeah.
Time is over now. So I think we have to going for the concluding statements. That means now we are at the closing of this episode. And regarding the closing remark, I would like to say that definitely my heartiest thanks to Professor Emeritus Frank for making his available time for this talk. And also I'd like to say that since ICPD 1994, that means measurable progress in access to family planning services or SRHR has occurred worldwide. And we have gone through the presentation of also Frank. And however, many obstacles lie ahead along a path that neither straightforward and nor uncontested. And according to the UN Population Division, also Frank was showing that we are now a more than 8 billion population, and it will reach to 10 billion by 2059. And never before there has been 8 billion people in this planet. And it will take approximately 13 years until 2037 to reach 9 billion. And that's a sign of the overall growth rate of the global population is slowing based on the UN population projections. But no doubt, 8 billion population is a milestone in human development. And these 8 billion people thinking that whether they can be a power, they can be, but what I think that they are big numbers, big challenges, or also big possibilities. And how far have we come, where we are going ahead? It needs proper leadership and proper policy formulations and implementations. And the world, actually, the countries we are experiencing demographic transitions, and everyone we are knowing and concerned from high to low fertility and mortality. But for African countries, we have seen different scenario. And however, high and persistence levels of fertility being experienced those countries. Professor Frank talked today demonstrated various family planning programs, education and SRHR and related factors to declining fertility in developing countries. And this also indicates the direction to move forward to make the world sustainable. And also, I'd like to say that we are experiencing mega trends. What we are seeing that experience in terms of fertility, urbanization, migration, technological change, climate change, these are actually impacting on our lives and sustainability, and including family planning and SRHR in coming times. Finally, I am thanking all of you very much for joining this talk. I can see that it's a late night in Bangladesh, but still you participated in this talk. I am personally very much grateful to each and every one of you. We are expecting to have you again on our 7th episode in coming months, and you will get an invitation to participate the upcoming episode 2. I hope all of you will attend the episodes as well. And this recorded video will be uploaded on my YouTube channel, and it will be linked to my personal website, www.mohammadmainulislam.com. So please feel free to watch and share the video with your networks. Please stay fine, and thank you, everyone. Goodbye and good night for now.
Goodbye. Thank you.